All right, so let's add some functionality. Let's add some properties and some chainable methods to our object, because I like that. And we'll also set up some setup features that are within the greeter but not exposed to the outside world. So I've already set up my object in here where I'm building my object in my function constructor, the one that I'll actually be using out in my app.js file. I've already built this up with the properties that are unique to each copy or each instance of the object. So in order to save memory space, where should I put any methods and other properties that would be shared by all of the objects generated here? Where should I put it? I could put self dot and add methods here, but it's better to put it where? On the prototype, which, thanks to this line of code, will be this object, right? And what about things that I want to use in the logic of this entire framework/library, but I don't want it to be exposed to the outside world at all? Can I create variables and concepts that aren't part of the object that gets returned when we use the greeter? Yes. I could put, for example, a variable here. Let's say supported languages. And I'll make it an array, and we're going to support English and Spanish. This is never exposed anywhere, right? It's not a property. It's not a method of the object being returned. It's inside this memory space of this function. However, I can use it inside my object because of what? Why is it that the object that's returned, well then, any methods on that object created here would have access to this variable? Why would any objects created here have access to this variable? Because this object's lexical environment is this whole function. And so thanks to closures, it'll close in this variable even when this immediately invoked function is done running. So it will have access to these variables, but they're hidden from any other developers from changing them without coming into the source code itself. All right, so let's say I also want to set up any other data that I want that I don't want developers to be able to change, but I do need access to. All right, I'm going to set up greetings, and then we'll also set up formal greetings. I could make these arrays, but I really would like to reference the greeting by the name of the language, by the string, the name of the language. Do you remember how we can do that with objects? How can we reference an object's property with a string? That's right, with the brackets. So I could put English in here, and if there's an .en property, it'll find it. So I can use that, and I'm just going to set up my greetings here, hello, and a Spanish one, hola. And then I'll set up a formal greeting, same property name, so I can reference it by language. Greetings, more formal. And saludos, also more formal in Spanish. Got that? So now I have a nice list of greetings, and I'm making sure that others outside this greeter framework/library can't just go like greeter.greetings and change these. I'll have to expose it for them if that's really what they want. Make sense? All right, so I have my languages, I have my greetings, I have my formal greetings, and I'm just going to put semicolons here so it's clear that this is just declaring and creating these brand new things, and I need my var to show that. Make sense? All right, let's move on. One other thing. Just because I'm a good developer, I want to add an option to log whenever this greetings get used or called. Maybe log to a database. In our case, we'll just log it to the console that it got used. So if I want to log it to the console, I need some messages for that. So I'll just create log messages. And same thing, maybe it'll be logged in will be the message. And in Spanish, in case I want Spanish logged messages, I'll just use this right here, inició sesión. That means logged in. Got it? All right, so I have 3 sets of messages, but they're objects, not arrays, because I want to reference them by the name-value pair, by the name of the property. And this will let me do this dynamically very easily. So that's some things that are not exposed, right? Not exposed to the outside world until I desire it to do so. Interesting, right? Okay. So now that I have these values that are hidden from being accidentally changed, greetings, formal greetings, log messages, let's add some things that will be exposed inside this prototype object so that any objects built here will have access to any methods and properties here, and any methods in here, the this variable will point to that object that was created. Remember all that? So I need a full name property because I have a first name and last name. We've built this plenty of times. A very simple one, not very smart one, but it's okay. This will just return first name and last name. I'm using object literal syntax to create a method called full name with this function expression to define it. Then a comma, right? Because I'm adding properties and methods in object literal syntax. So I separate them with a comma. What else might I need? I'd like to be able to validate that it's a language that's supported. So if the developer tries to call this and pass German or French or something, I can tell him that it doesn't support this language. I set up a hidden variable here that'll be hidden to the outside world, but accessible via the closure, called supported languages. So JavaScript will make sure that when this function is called, because of where it sits lexically, it'll go up the scope chain and find supported languages where it's sitting in memory. So this is an array. I can use index of, which just tells me whether it's found in the array, and I'm going to use this.language. Remember this, the keyword this will point to the object that's calling this function, and the object will store its own language that we're requesting. And I'm going to see if it's found or not. If it's not found, I'm going to throw a new error. And this is a simple way to throw an error in JavaScript if you didn't know this. All right, so it's just a validate function, just so I can throw an error if we're asking for a language that isn't supported. Makes sense? And, oh, actually, there's a syntax error here. I should say if. There we go. Did you catch that? All right, so if an index of returns a -1 if it's not found, otherwise it'll return a 0 or a 1. All right, so validate. So that works just fine, and I have another comma here. So I'm just adding more methods. I'm adding functionality to my objects. They'll have access to all of these. So I'm just going to go ahead and add some. Let's say I want to have a regular greeting. So now I have the first name and last name of the person. I want to go out and grab the greetings based on the language that was chosen. So greetings, and then I'll use brackets operator to get the property. And the property I've named after the language. So this.language, whatever is set up as the language in the object, I'll go get that equivalent property name, do a space, and then the first name of the person, maybe an exclamation mark or something like that, because this is informal, and a formal greeting. Let's just do a function, and I have formal greetings as another object with properties, and I can grab that property by name using the chosen language. So it'll go out and get the appropriate language. I'll do a comma and this dot. Actually, I want full name in this case because it's formal, so let's do full name. All right, so now I want some methods that I can really use and be chainable. Remember we saw chainable methods in jQuery? For example, I don't want to always have to call greeting or formal greeting. That just encapsulated that code separately. So I'll just have a greet method, which is the one I'll probably be really using as a developer, and I'll pass whether or not I want it formal. All right, I've already written this up, so I'm just going to type it out real quick. I'm going to have a message, and then I'm also going to log when this happens because I just want to use this and show how it's used. So I'll log the greeting to the console, so I can do .greet and log it to the console that way. All right, so I have this message. If it's formal, then it's the result of formal greeting. If it's not, it's the result of greeting. These are just returning strings, and I'll output it to the console. And then I'll make it chainable by returning this. See that? So .greet, whether or not I want it formal, will log the appropriate greeting to the console. And then I'm also going to write a log function. This is when I want to manually make sure that something is logged. I'll log it to the console. Internet Explorer actually doesn't have a console variable unless its console is open. So I'm going to make sure that it is by just saying if console. That's an object. If it's undefined, it'll be coerced to false. So as long as I have a console object available, I'll console.log, and then I'm just going to say something according to this log messages. So very similar to what I've done before. I'll do log messages, this dot language, plus maybe a colon, and this dot full name. So whoever it was that was used, it'll log to the console that log message. So this is just a greeting, and this I'm using for logging. And let's see, what other functionality can I do? Oh, well, let's make this chainable as well. So I'll return this at the end of this function. So both of these are chainable, meaning I can call the object and then the method and then dot another method. What if I want to change the language on the fly? Could you write a setLang method that changes the language on the fly and make that a chainable method? So I could call .greet in English, then set the language to Spanish, and then call .greet again, all in one line. Let's do function. It'll take the new language that I want, and I'll validate this after I set this dot language equal to that language that got passed in. So I'm update my object and then call validate to make sure that it's valid, and then return this. Make sense? So I'm just creating properties and methods along the way. And each one of these is returning this variable so that they're chainable. All right, let's try using this. I'm just going to double check my syntax because my editor's been acting a little strange. That suggests that somewhere something's wrong. Oh, look. See that console.log? I don't have an ending parenthesis. That's why it was acting strange. It was getting confused. All right, so I have all of these properties, all of these methods inside a single object literal. And that object literal ends, right there. See that? One giant object literal that's the prototype with all of these methods defined on it. So now let's use our object with all of its properties available on the prototype. I've got my object returned, right? So $, points to the greeter function, which is up here. The greeter function returns a new greeter.init down here, which builds the object, sets the values. This prototype makes sure that all of those objects created from here has access to all of these methods on this prototype property. Got that? So I should be able to do something like g.greet. And what g.greet should do is it should decide whether I passed formal or not, and I just used coercion to see if I passed it. And if I did, it'll give me a formal greeting, and if I didn't, it will give me a regular greeting, and I made it chainable by returning this, or returning the object that's actually calling the method. So let's see if this works. Hello, John. And that's chainable, so I could call greet again right away if I wanted to and say true. And that's being passed to that formal parameter, which will then get me a formal greeting and pass that or log that to the console. So what I should see is this function is called, returns this, which is the G object, and then calls it again on the G object. And there I have my greeting and my formal greeting. And then since I've changed a language swap, I can stick in between there set lang, change it to Spanish, there we go. What do you think? If I had set something that wasn't valid, that validate should throw an error. So if I tried French, it's not supported. There it is. So I have chainable methods and an object that I created without having to call the new operator using the jQuery syntax. Take a look at this code. Try it for yourself. Try doing some things. Let's move on.